Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. As award season wraps up for Hollywood, with the Oscars occurring just last night, now's as good a time as any to talk about the supposed inclusion problem they're having there. Now, if you saw the Academy Award nominations and watched the show last night, you would know that the movie industry has been forcing diversity into everywhere it can for a long time now. 3 black movies were nominated for Best Picture, which is probably too many if you ask me. Regardless, our old friends at TheRoot.com beg to differ on this. Despite getting pandered to and overrepresented for years, the always pro-black and anti-white crew over there at The Root are of course never happy or satisfied. That's why they made this abomination of a video a few days ago called "Hollywood's Got a Problem with Inclusion and These Celebrities Are Trying to Solve It. This should be good." And I love how their thumbnail even has the balls to say diversity in Hollywood, even though that picture features 10 people and 9 of them are black. Starting to get the feeling that diversity and inclusion don't mean what these guys think they do. They're definitely not using diversity to mean the state of being diverse or having a range of different things. This picture isn't different or diverse, it's almost all black. And The Root certainly doesn't use inclusion to mean the state of including or being included in a group, because that picture doesn't include many whites, or any browns or Asians for that matter. So I think you get the point. When The Root or other leftists and social justice warriors say diversity or inclusion, those words don't really mean what you'd think they do. Now, you could say this is them either ignorantly misusing the words, or perhaps they're being deceptive and misrepresenting them in order to garner support and engage in public manipulation. Take your pick there, but either way, it's looking pretty bad for The Root already, and we haven't even started. So without further ado, let's go ahead and check out the video anyway and see what they have to say about this.
It's no secret that Hollywood's got a white man problem. The problem is that there are too many of them. The issue of inclusion, or the lack thereof, has been looming over Hollywood for as long as the movie industry has existed.
Well, I really don't see the problem with having too many white men in Hollywood. Would you agree that there's too many Asians working in salons and doing nails? Or what about basketball? What if I said there's too many blacks in the NBA? Do you guys think The Root would have a problem with that? I highly doubt it. And that's because this isn't about inclusion at all. This is about excluding white men. Clearly this video has something against us from the get-go. This chick straight up says there's too many white men in movie making jobs. And she said it with very little support or reasoning. Just something about not enough melanin and lacking inclusion, but why? I guess we're supposed to assume this is to make things fair or balanced, but I'm not really sure that's true. And The Root never explains why they want less white males, they just say it. But clearly they want more blacks and things, that's pretty obvious. And as you'll soon see, the reason The Root doesn't directly address the fairness argument is because that's not what they really want. They don't want a fair and balanced group of people working in TV and film. What they want is all blacks and, of course, little to no whites.
In a 10-year period, there were nearly 50,000 characters in the 1,100 most popular films with speaking roles. And over 70% were white, but only 12% were black, while less than 7% were Asian or Latinx.
Well, this is very interesting. The host presents this as a way to say there's very little minorities in movies, but there are a few big glaring problems with this right out the gate. First of all, this racial makeup almost exactly mirrors the demographics of the United States. So if we're judging this by, say, accuracy or fairness, this study would show representation is pretty damn spot on. But that's not what The Root is really going for. They're trying to show how little minorities are supposedly represented here, even though blacks making up 13% of speaking roles directly reflects them being around 13% of the population. But regardless, The Root still wants more, because they don't want fairness or accurate representation. They clearly just want more blacks and browns and, of course, less whites, because they're biased race hustlers who are bitter and not too bright about it either. And here's the other big issue with this study. This is not a complete and comprehensive study of all the English-speaking roles in America. No, this only includes the top 1,100 most popular films. And although The Root tries to breeze over that fact, it really has more significance than they would like to admit. You see, there were lots of other movies made in this time frame, probably twice as many as the 1,000 or so mentioned in the study. That means there could have been loads of more black or brown parts out there, but they were just not as good or well received by the public. So with that said, all this study really shows is what's popular and what people like to watch in America. And surprise, surprise, people tend to like watching other people who are the same color as them. That's why the results reflect the demographics of our country so well, because each group of people is enjoying watching their own kind on the screen. And there's nothing wrong with with that either. The Root might claim that's racist though, because whites watching other whites is white supremacy or some bullshit. But I hate to break it to you, but that's exactly what the Root is advocating in this very video. They are campaigning for more blacks on the screen because they want to watch their own kind too. But when whites do the same kind of thing, it's wrong, unfair, and offensive, or racist. Double standards much? God damn. I'm only about 1 minute into this video and it's already fallen apart.
And the barometer for a speaking role meant that these characters said one word.
Speaking one word is still speaking. That's why it's called a speaking role, lady. I don't care how sassy of a look you can give here. This is just a fact. These are how words work, and this is how the world works. I know you guys at the Root like to change the definitions of words, and you're also spoiled and greedy about things, but just because it's never enough for SJWs like you, that doesn't make the way things are in the real world wrong or unfair. And the least you could do is come out straight up and say this directly. You want more blacks in American movies. Not a lot of shame in that either, except you're lying and pretending you're doing it to be fair. You're not saving the world here, honey. You're pushing your own preferences onto everyone else, while pretending to be virtuous and self-righteous while you do it. So basically, just because you think you're some kind of hero because you want more blacks in TV, doesn't mean you really are.
When looking at gender across the decade, men were over 2 times more likely than women to have speaking roles. Between 2014 and 2017, about only 1% of the speaking roles were LGBTQ characters.
Again, let's remember, this isn't going over the entirety of films that were made in these time frames. These studies analyze the most popular films. So while the Root thinks they're saying one thing, that these numbers are low because minorities aren't getting enough chances, well, really, what the studies actually say is these are the kinds of roles people prefer to watch. And that's a big difference. The Root wants you to think there's some kind of injustice here when there's really not. Really, what the Root should be doing is encouraging the people to watch more minorities on their own. Forcing them into more roles through affirmative actioning in casting won't fix this. People will still watch what they want, even if they cast most movies with most minorities. The real problem here is the American audience, I guess. And I say problem loosely since I don't really see an issue with this. There's no crime here, and it's not even something offensive or wrong. The Root is just misconstruing it that way because they're trying to push their pro-black, anti-white narratives, while seeming to have authority or some kind of moral high ground when they really don't.
Behind the camera, folks aren't any less pale. 1,200 films examined between 2007 and 2018 credited over 1,300 directors. 80 were black, and only 5 of those were women. Hollywood, baby, what is you doing?
I'll tell you what Hollywood is doing. They're running one of the most successful and profitable industries the world has ever seen. Movies that come out of Hollywood are getting played across the globe, making millions upon billions of dollars. And here's the deal, Root. They didn't get that successful by hiring people based on their skin color or their gender. No, Hollywood is a pretty capitalistic, laissez-faire business who will hire the best people who will make the most money for them. And since you brought up the director position, well, I would like to tell you, I see this study sending a very different message than what the Root sees. They clearly think something is wrong here. They act as if something or someone in the system is being racist and keeping minorities and women down and out of parts. But I don't see it that way at all, because it's not that way. And it's the same way I don't see it as problematic when most teachers are women, or most hockey players are Canadian or Russian. Certain jobs and professions attract certain types of people, and sometimes certain races or genders excel at a thing more than another. Nothing wrong with that either. So in this case, back to the Root video, I would say white males are clearly better and more talented at directing films. Because if there were more talented blacks or browns or women, ones who can make good, award-winning movies that make lots of money, well, Hollywood would hire them in a heartbeat. They're not going to pass on a profitable deal just because a director is black. That's ridiculous. That would be them leaving money out on the table, and that's not something good businesses do. And this shouldn't be too surprising to us either since, you know, America is a majority white nation after all, which was even more of a majority white the further back you go in time. So I also really hate it when this video tries to time travel because, well, the movie business started over 100 years ago, and back then, the United States was almost 90% white. So to complain about lacking diversity even then is more absurd than claiming it's lacking now.
An inclusion rider is a stipulation put in an actor's contract around representation, essentially saying, if you want to work with me, here's how the cast and crew needs to look. I don't know about y'all, but I'd love to see the films reflect the diversity we see in the real world.
Are you serious? We already went over the numbers and they directly reflected the diversity of our real world. We already have the thing you're claiming to want, lady. Inclusion riders aren't going to fix a problem that doesn't exist. And frankly, having a clause in your contract that states you will only work with certain races of people, that sounds pretty racist and offensive to me. Can you imagine if I got hired at a restaurant and told them I would only work with other whites? That would never fly. Shit, I'd probably get arrested. And this really reminds me of that whole Ellen Pompeo story we did a while back. That mean old actor lady who wanted to do the same kind of thing. She was virtue signaling too and saying she wanted less whites around her on set. And that sounded just as racist back then as it does now in today's story.
But some folks like Ava DuVernay had been riding for inclusion before inclusion riders became a thing. The director, who speaks out against injustice in all of its forms, mandated that her projects Selma and A Wrinkle in Time have half of her crew in every department be filled with women or people of color.
Is this really progress though? Seems like it's exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. Didn't Martin Luther King Jr. say we should judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin? Funny how over time, after getting equality, following the civil rights movement, modern blacks and leftists are becoming just as racist as those they used to fight against. And somehow they think they're justified because I guess there was racism before, so they think it's okay for them to be racist now. It's really not though, and film crews should not be hired this way. They should pick the best people for the job, period. Whether that turns out to be all Mexicans, all females, or Nigerians, who cares? In fact, we know that the only reason this is a problem is because typically it's white males who are the best. That's why racist SJWs have to affirmative action minorities into things, passing up on the actual best candidates for the job in order to be reverse racist because they're insecure about racists in the past or some shit like that. It's also worth noting that this kind of system doesn't even work well. I don't know why The Root would use this picture as a good example of this. This is the director and crew for the Wrinkle in Time movie, which was a terrible film that was horribly received and it bombed at the box office. But for some reason, The Root thinks we should follow the example of a failed project, because at the end of the day, they don't really care about the movies, their quality, or the audience and their enjoyment. All The Root really cares about is forcing more blacks into everything, while also taking out as many whites as possible. In the end, we've got another example of SJW activists trying to take over a popular male space. Much like how they've invaded comic books and video games, so have the leftists tried to take over Hollywood. For all the wrong reasons again too. To be completely honest, I don't care who is in the cast and crews of movies, as long as they're the best fits for their jobs. If all the camera operators end up being trans Filipinos, then so be it. So long as the best movies are being made by the best artists, then who really cares? At the end of the day, this is an art, but it's also a business too. And that's why Hollywood is still staying out of this SJW push completely. But it's certainly a growing and worrying trend. And this affirmative action into all things entertainment is getting worse each and every year. So it's really time for it to stop. What do you guys think? Does The Root really want inclusion in Hollywood? Would they be trying to make things fair if, say, all of Hollywood was black people already? And do you think hiring people based on their race is a good thing? And would these SJWs get upset if I made a movie with a clause in my contract that said there had to be over 50% whites working on it? Why is that not okay with them, but these pro-black writers are? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.